There is a quiet truth most people feel, but rarely say out loud. The world is not just moving forward on its own, it is being steered in subtle ways by those who understand how money and power actually work. At the very top, people who control capital do not need to compete the way you think they do. In many ways, they operate within the same system, benefiting from the same rules, quietly aligned on one outcome. That outcome is simple: to keep the majority of people working, earning, and spending without ever stepping outside the cycle. At the center of this system is something that sounds complicated, but is actually very simple. It is the idea of building enough capital so that your life is no longer dependent on selling your time. Most people think financial freedom means luxury cars, massive houses, or millions in the bank. But that is not the version that truly matters. Real freedom begins the moment your basic living costs are covered without you having to work every single day. Imagine waking up on a Monday morning without pressure, without urgency, without needing to trade your hours just to stay afloat. You could spend your time reading, learning, building something meaningful, or even doing nothing for a while. You would not be forced into decisions based on survival, but instead guided by choice. That level of freedom is not about being rich in the way social media defines it. It is about reclaiming control over your time and your mind. And here is where things become uncomfortable. Because the system that surrounds you does not naturally support that outcome. In fact, it quietly resists it. If too many people reached a point where they no longer needed to work, the entire structure would begin to shift. Businesses rely on people showing up every day, giving their energy, their attention, and their effort. The economy depends on continuous participation from people who feel they have no other option. Money in this sense is often misunderstood. People believe money creates wealth, but in reality, it mostly redistributes it. It moves through the system, flowing toward those who already have capital systems and leverage. For this flow to continue, there needs to be a constant supply of people exchanging their time for income. And not just temporarily, but for most of their lives. That is what keeps everything running. If you look closely, you will start to notice patterns everywhere. The tools around you, the messages you hear, even the goals you are encouraged to chase, all seem to point in the same direction. Stay busy, keep upgrading, keep consuming, and most importantly, keep working. Not because anyone is forcing you directly, but because the environment is designed to guide you there. It feels natural, but it is anything but accidental. This is where the first invisible force comes into play, and it is one of the most powerful. It does not restrict you or tell you what not to do. Instead, it gently shapes what you want. Through media advertising and social influence, it builds a version of success that is tied almost entirely to spending. You are told that happiness comes from what you own, that your identity is reflected in your lifestyle, and that your youth is something you must fully enjoy before it slips away. At first, it feels harmless, even exciting. You work hard, you earn money, and you reward yourself. A better phone, a nicer trip, a more comfortable life. These things are not inherently wrong, but the way they are presented creates a subtle pressure. You begin to compare yourself to others. You start to worry about falling behind. You feel like you need to keep up, even when you are not sure what you are chasing anymore. Over time, this turns into a pattern. You spend what you earn, sometimes even more than you earn, because the moment you slow down, it feels like you are missing out. You tell yourself it is temporary, that you will start saving later, that you deserve to enjoy life now. And maybe you do, but what often goes unnoticed is the cost of that delay. Years pass, and instead of building a foundation, you are maintaining a lifestyle. Then one day you look back, you have memories, experiences, maybe even a collection of things that once felt important, but your financial position has not changed in any meaningful way. You are still dependent on your next paycheck. You are still tied to your job, your schedule, your obligations. And the idea of stepping away even for a short time feels impossible. This is not an accident. It is the result of a system that does not need to stop you from saving. It simply needs to make saving feel less important than spending. It reframes discipline as deprivation and consumption as freedom. It convinces you that building long-term security can wait, while short-term satisfaction cannot. And without realizing it, you start to follow that script. The real challenge is not recognizing this pattern. Many people do, at least on some level. The challenge is stepping out of it while everything around you continues to pull you back in. Because once you begin to resist, once you start saving even a little, a second force appears. And this one is even more subtle because it does not feel like a trap at all. It feels like progress. The second trap usually arrives dressed as self-improvement. It sounds responsible, mature, and even aspirational. People around you start saying things like, you should upgrade your lifestyle because you have earned it. A better phone because your old one still works but does not reflect your level anymore. A nicer apartment because you deserve comfort. A newer car because it feels like the next logical step. None of these choices seem reckless on their own, which is exactly why they are so effective. The moment your income rises, the pressure to raise your expenses rises with it. This is one of the most overlooked forces in modern life. You finally start making more money, and instead of gaining freedom, you get introduced to a more expensive version of normal. Suddenly, what once felt like a luxury becomes a basic standard. What once felt unnecessary now feels reasonable. And before you know it, every increase in income has already been assigned a destination. This is how people stay trapped, even while doing everything right on paper. They work hard, earn more, look more successful, and slowly take on commitments that lock them into that income level. A car payment becomes normal. A larger rent payment becomes acceptable. A mortgage becomes a symbol of adulthood and stability. But in many cases, these decisions do not create freedom. They create dependency. The person looks wealthier from the outside while becoming more financially fragile on the inside. That is the quiet danger of lifestyle inflation. You think you are building a better life, but often you are just making it harder to step away. You cannot leave a stressful job because your monthly obligations are too high. You cannot take time off to learn something new because too many bills are waiting. You cannot say no to work that drains you because your financial structure no longer allows flexibility. What feels like growth can easily become a polished version of the same cage. This is why debt can be so deceptive. It gives people the feeling of ownership without the reality of freedom. You think you own the car, but the payment schedule owns part of your future. You think you bought security, but what you really bought was a long-term obligation that depends on your continued labor. And once that becomes your reality, your relationship to work changes. You are no longer just earning money. You are protecting a structure that cannot survive without your obedience. The deepest problem is not the payment itself. It is the psychological effect. Once your life depends on constant income, your choices become smaller. You tolerate environments you hate. You stay quiet when something is wrong. You keep going not because you believe in the work, but because stopping feels dangerous. This is how financial pressure becomes emotional pressure. And this is how people can spend decades working hard while moving nowhere that actually matters to them. If you zoom out far enough, you begin to see a larger pattern. Society is often divided into different roles, but not all roles create the same kind of freedom. Most people are employees, which means they trade time and energy for a paycheck. Some people are self-employed, which gives them more control, but often they are still tied directly to their own labor. If they stop working, the money stops too. That is a different form of independence, but not yet true leverage. Then there are people who own systems and people who invest in systems. These are the groups that benefit most from the structure. They use capital teams and leverage to generate income that is not limited by their personal time alone. That does not mean every business owner or investor is evil. It simply means the system is designed to reward those who move beyond selling hours. And in order for that design to keep working, there must always be a large population of people who never make that transition. This is why the earlier traps matter so much. Consumer pressure and constant upgrading are not random cultural habits. They work together to keep people from accumulating the one thing that changes their position: capital. Without capital, you cannot invest. Without capital, you cannot buy time. Without capital, you cannot create breathing room long enough to learn, build, or reposition yourself. You remain where the system needs you: most productive, available, and dependent. That can sound harsh, but it also reveals something hopeful. If the trap has a structure, then escape has a structure too. It does not begin with some glamorous side hustle or a viral success story. It begins with a much quieter move. It begins with refusing to let every dollar that enters your life immediately leave it. It begins with understanding that saving money is not about becoming miserly or fearful. It is about building the first layer of distance between your survival and your labor. Most people have been taught to think of savings the wrong way. They think savings is what you do after life is already comfortable, or that it exists only to buy something larger later. But that mindset misses the deeper purpose entirely. Savings is not just stored money. Savings is stored time. It is stored choice. It is stored dignity. The first real shift in your life happens when you stop seeing savings as delayed consumption and start seeing it as the beginning of freedom. When you begin to see savings differently, everything else starts to shift. It stops being about how much you can afford to spend and starts becoming about how much control you can quietly build. Even small amounts begin to matter, not because they will make you rich overnight, but because they slowly change your relationship with time. Instead of living paycheck to paycheck, you begin to create a gap, a small space where you are no longer completely dependent on the next payment. At first, that space is barely noticeable. Maybe it is just a few $100s set aside, then a few thousand. It does not feel powerful yet, and it certainly does not look impressive to anyone else. But something important is happening beneath the surface. You are no longer fully exposed. You are no longer forced to accept every situation just to survive. That small buffer begins to act like a shield, giving you the ability to pause, to think, and to choose more carefully. This is where most people make a critical mistake. They underestimate the psychological value of savings because they are focused only on the financial return. They compare it to investing, to business opportunities, to faster ways of making money. And while those things can be useful later, they are not the first step. The first step is stability. Without stability, every decision you make is influenced by urgency. And urgency almost always leads to poor judgment. Think about what changes when you have even a few months of living expenses saved. You can walk away from a toxic environment without panic. You can take time to learn something new without feeling like you are falling apart. You can say no when something does not align with your values. These are not small upgrades. These are fundamental shifts in how you experience your own life. And they all come from something that looks simple from the outside. Once that foundation is in place, the next phase begins. This is where you start using the time you have created instead of immediately filling it with more work. Most people When they get a little breathing room, use it to rest, which is understandable. But if you want to move beyond the system, you have to be intentional with that space. You have to invest part of that time into increasing your value in a way that the market recognizes and reward. Not all hours are equal. 1 hour spent doing repetitive tasks will never be valued the same as 1 hour spent solving complex problems or creating something scalable. The difference between those two types of work is not just effort. It is skill, perspective, and leverage. And those things are not given to you by default. They are built over time through focused learning and deliberate practice. This is the phase that feels slow and sometimes even frustrating. While others are upgrading their lifestyles, you may be quietly investing in skills that do not show immediate results. You might be learning how to communicate better, how to sell, how to create content, how to understand data, or how to work with new technologies. It can feel like you are falling behind, especially when the rewards are not instant. But in reality, you are changing the trajectory of your future. After a few years of consistent effort, something begins to compound. The work that once took you a full day might now take a few hours. The value you create starts to increase, not because you are working harder, but because you are working at a higher level. This is when your time starts to become more valuable in the market. And when your time becomes more valuable, your income potential begins to expand in ways that were not possible before. At this stage, you may still be working a job, but your position is different. You are no longer just exchanging time for money at the lowest level. You have options. You can choose better opportunities, negotiate higher pay, or take on work that aligns more closely with your strengths. More importantly, you now have the ability to save larger amounts of money in a shorter period of time. And that accelerates everything. When your income increases, but your spending remains controlled, the gap between what you earn and what you keep grows rapidly. That gap is where your real progress happens. It is where you begin to accumulate capital at a meaningful pace. And once you reach that point, the system that once felt impossible to escape starts to loosen its grip. Eventually, you arrive at a moment that feels very different from where you started. You are no longer working because you have no choice. You are working because you are choosing to. That shift may not look dramatic from the outside, but internally, it changes everything. You are no longer reacting to life. You are directing it. And from that position, new paths begin to open that were previously invisible to you. From this point forward, the game changes in a quiet but irreversible way. You are no longer focused on survival or even just improvement. You begin to think in terms of positioning. Instead of asking how to earn more this month, you start asking how to build something that continues to produce value over time. This is where many people make their next transition, not because they suddenly become brilliant, but because they finally have the space to think beyond immediate needs. With enough capital and enough clarity, you are no longer limited to a single source of income. You can experiment carefully, invest thoughtfully, or begin building systems that do not rely entirely on your daily effort. This does not mean quitting everything overnight or taking reckless risks. It means you now have the ability to make strategic moves without fear controlling every decision. That alone puts you in a completely different category than where you started. Some people choose to invest, allowing their money to grow through assets that produce returns over time. Others choose to build something of their own, creating a structure where their effort is multiplied through systems, tools, or other people. Both paths are valid, and often they overlap. What matters is that your income is no longer tied only to the number of hours you personally work. That is the real shift from labor to leverage. It is important to understand that this stage is not about chasing extreme wealth or trying to outperform everyone else. It is about maintaining control. The same discipline that helped you save in the beginning now protects you from new forms of distraction. Because even at this level, the system still tries to pull you back. Bigger income brings bigger temptations, and if you are not careful, you can rebuild the same cage with more expensive materials. That is why awareness remains critical. You begin to see how easy it is for people to rise financially and still remain trapped mentally. They upgrade everything except their freedom. They earn more but feel just as pressured. They gain status but lose flexibility. And in many cases, they end up right back where they started, only with more responsibility and less room to breathe. The pattern repeats because the mindset never changed. Breaking out of that pattern requires something deeper than knowledge. It requires discipline that holds steady even when no one is watching. It requires the ability to say no, not just when you have nothing, but especially when you have more than enough. It requires clarity about what you actually want from your life, not what you have been told to want. And most importantly, it requires the courage to move differently from the crowd. The system itself is not your enemy. It is not designed to harm you personally, nor is it designed to save you. It simply operates according to its own rules. It rewards certain behaviors and punishes others. If you understand those rules, you can work within them without being consumed by them. But if you ignore them, you will likely spend years running in circles without understanding why nothing changes. At the end of all of this, the question becomes very simple, but also very personal. Do you want to spend your life reacting to the system, or do you want to learn how to navigate it with intention? Do you want to trade your time indefinitely, or do you want to slowly buy it back, piece by piece? There is no perfect answer, and there is no universal timeline. But there is always a starting point. That starting point is not complicated. It does not require perfect conditions or extraordinary talent. It begins with a decision to keep more than you spend, to think more than you react, and to act with awareness instead of impulse. It begins with saving not as a way to accumulate things, but as a way to accumulate freedom. And from that freedom, everything else becomes possible in ways that are hard to see from the outside. You may not notice dramatic changes immediately. The process is often slow, and at times it can feel invisible. But over time, small decisions compound into real distance. Distance from pressure, distance from dependency, and distance from a life that feels out of your control. And once you experience even a small amount of that distance, you begin to realize something important. You were never meant to stay trapped in the cycle. You were only taught to believe that you had no other choice. The moment you start to question that belief is the moment everything begins to shift. And the sooner you begin, the more time you give yourself to build a life that is not defined by obligation, but guided by intention.